Welcome to this video in which I'm going to be looking at and discussing my first design for a mass-powered buggy. So before I go any further, let's just cover the basics and perhaps actually see it working. We've got a basic buggy arrangement at the bottom here with 4 wheels, and 2 wheels are attached to our front axle and 2 wheels here, and 2 wheels attached to a back axle. Round this back axle we have a piece of string wound. That piece of string goes up and away to the top, where it passes over a pulley, and the string passes down the other side of the pulley, and it then comes to in this case, 100-gram weight. So the idea is that, well, you can see at the moment that this mass is just hooked onto a bit of a beam there for my frame, some triangulation. If I release that mass, then what should happen is the buggy should gently roll forward until the mass falls down to the bottom, and it's designed so it lands on this little platform here, and then it might just roll a little further forward before finally friction stops it from moving any further. So without further ado, I'm going to just unhook it and we're going to see what happens. So to unhook it in this particular case, I'm just going to pull it back a little bit, and as I do so, it's going to pull on the string. The string's going to wind around the axle some more. That's going to pull the string over the pulley, and you'll see in a second it's going to unhook the mass there. Now this particular point, you might notice there, but there's some beams or struts there on the right hand side that are starting to buckle, and I'll come to that problem in a second. But now I'm ready to go. I can't back off any further, unfortunately, because while I'm holding the buggy with one hand and I'm holding the camera with the other, but I'm going to let go and I'll watch it with the camera. Here we go. Okay, so it came a little bit to an abrupt stop there, but that's the basic idea. It didn't go as far as it should have done, and I'm going to be discussing the reasons why in a second. Right, let's bring it back and let's look at some of my design features here. So, as I said, I've got a basic buggy arrangement at the bottom. You're going to have access to a limited amount of corrugated card to make your own mass-powered buggy. And one of my objectives here was to try and make wheels that are as big as possible. And the reason for that is because as the string here, let's come around this angle here, as the string here unwinds on the axle, with each rotation of the axle, I want to try and get maximum movement forwards. By having a wheel that's as large as possible, has a radius or a diameter as big as possible, the circumference is bigger, which means that each turn of the wheel means that it will actually travel further along the floor. So that was one of my first considerations. Now I could have made these wheels bigger based on the amount of card I had available, but well, I kept it like this. I think I made them about 65 millimeters. So that would be my first suggestion: make them as big as you can. I also had a few problems here with regard to the manufacturing. This axle, in fact both axles, I kept cutting them too short, so I actually had to cheat a little bit. I had to actually come, this is the third axle I made for the back and the third axle for the front, simply because I kept, they weren't long enough. I wasn't considering the fact that as well as having this chassis here with these gussets, I also have got some little spacers, and then I had to have the dowel passing through the wheels, so make sure you have axles of sufficient width. Just talking about the axles and the wheels in a bit more detail, I'm going to turn this around now so I can see this more clearly. I'm going to have a look at the front here. Now, what I wanted to try and do was make sure that my wheel didn't touch the actual chassis or the frame here, and so to do that, hopefully you can see back here as well, I've actually laser cut a very small mini wheel, which actually acts a little bit like how can I phrase this, a little spacer, which holds the wheel away from the chassis and the frame, because I didn't want this to obviously catch. Now as a result, it does probably catch a little bit on this small little spacer, but because there's much less surface area there, the friction's greatly reduced. So I do feel that that was a particularly good design feature there. You can actually see, if I turn it around here, you can actually see here, lift it up there, hopefully, hang on a second, hopefully you can see there on that back axle there are actually 2 very small little spacers right here, and I actually put these on because I had the idea of having this string wound round in such a way that the first pull of the string by the mass would be actually on an increased diameter axle. So I'll be using this spacer here to make a little mini pulley. And then the idea was that I'd get better acceleration, but once it was running, the string would then run down to the thin axle, and then I'd get more speed. So it's a bit like thinking about the gears on your bike. If you want to start off fast, you start in a low gear, so you've got a big sprocket at the back. As you accelerate, you go to a smaller sprocket at the back, a higher gear. That was the idea. As it turned out, well, it didn't work out that way, and I found that there was no problem anyway with having the string wrapped around the axle. Besides, the feeling is that I was going for distance rather than speed. Maybe there's going to be a speed challenge at this point, I don't know. Continuing to work with the actual axles here, I'm going to take this mass off for a second, and I'm just going to turn this over. I'll put it on its, do like that, okay? And hopefully what you can see here is I've got a tiny little nail there. Now this nail is actually knocked into the wood. Mr. Bain adopted this idea with his, he stole it from me, and he basically drilled a hole through the dowel here and then pushed through a small nail. So his solution seemed to be a little more elegant, although sometimes the nail drops out, whereas mine's nailed in there. But this was quite tricky to do. But the idea is that I've got a loop in my string here. I can loop it around that nail, and then when I start to turn the wheels to wind up the string, you can see it then starts to wind appropriately. I found without that nail it just didn't work. But there's another issue here as well, and that is that my dowel is too close to this strut, and the knot here in the string keeps catching this straw here, this strut. So that was another design flaw on my part. I should have had the axle further away from this strut. I'm going to keep going here. I wanted to make sure that I had really strong gussets here for the side of the buggy, although it didn't really work out particularly well. In fact, that one was basically completely wonky, but it kind of works better at the back. But I kind of overcomplicated the whole thing, and really these gussets are just too much. I should have just perhaps had one panel on the side here for the axle to go through, and having this top bit and side bit was really just overkill. So I would do that a little bit differently, but there you go. Additionally, now hang on a second, let's back off for a second. You'll notice I've also got these two corrugated card beams here which run across. This is laser cut from my limited selection of corrugated card. And the idea of this was that I wanted to make it so that as the mass fell, the mass would land squarely on these two corrugated pieces of card. And it does actually work really, really well. There is, however, one problem, and that is kind of sneaking suspicion that we're not going to be working with these larger masses. We're going to be working with these smaller masses right here. Now this is actually 100 grams, as is this one right here, and so basically they have the same mass. This one will work better because the distance from the hook down to the bottom of the mass is reduced, so it will actually pull the string further down, so it will allow me to wind more string around this axle. So this should give me, I don't know, an extra 20 or 30 centimeters hopefully. But of course the problem now is that this little corrugated card platform that I made, well, it doesn't support the mass falls straight through, so that would have to be rethought. In fact, I'm not too sure how this is going to work in the specifications. I mean, ideally I'd have a little platform here that this would rest on, but I would imagine that platform would have to be laser cut out of card, so that might be a bit of a problem. I'd have to try and work that one through. I'm going to start to work up the model now. I wanted to, well, as I say, I tried to make the actual tower here as tall as I could, and basically it's one length of straw from bottom to top. And if I was in your shoes, I'd try to make it even taller than that. But as you can see here, I did get some buckling of the straws. Now, this was because the buckling here was created because if I push it down, you'll see even more that it starts to bend. I overloaded the model, basically. I was experimenting with different masses and seeing how far I would go. And this actually buckled at 700 grams. So I'm quite proud it was able to lift or support 700 grams until it actually ran, and then under the movement the straws there creased and buckled, and then the whole thing collapsed. But now the problem is that it can't take any more than 100 grams. So, well, you know, I'm not going to worry about it, but it does show that this tower doesn't have to be super duper strong. Now, I have got some triangulation happening here with some struts here and a strut coming across here at the back and another strut coming across here at the front. To be fair, I should have had more triangulation either in the middle or lower down. But I'm fairly confident that if you're clever with your use of art straws, you'll be able to get a buggy here that's twice or certainly 50% taller. That will give you further distance for the mast to fall. And as long as you keep the mast falling and as long as you keep the string unwinding on the axle, you should really be able to get a very, very good distance achieved. Probably the crowning achievement of this model is the pulley mechanism at the top, and what I've done here is I've just layered together laminated corrugated card, and that proved to be particularly successful. So that was pretty cool, although I've had to stick in all these little card gussets and things, which is a bit of a mess. So, you know, at the end of the day, it is a success, it works. But hopefully, with the suggestions I've given to you there in terms of its successes and failures, you can do an even better job. I wish you good luck.